In this final video, we're going to talk about some best management practices for breeding and selection of livestock. The first key concept for any selection program is having a good method to identify your animals, some form of permanent identification. We utilize a dual tag system where we have a flock tag and with a Shearwell electronic ID tag, because we also want to maintain and utilize RFID technology to be able to collect our data from our sheep. It does make it so much faster to collect weights and those types of things from our sheep using the EID tags. So we use a dual tag system because almost inevitably tags get ripped out. And so that is where having two tags really has helped us out and minimized lost tag issues. Another way that's permanent is tattooing. Tattooing, like on the goat side, is actually required for registrations. But on sheep, it's sometimes hard, especially on our South Downs, to try to tattoo them because their ears are so fuzzy, they're short, and extremely thick and very difficult to get a good tattoo on. But there's got to be some way to uniquely identify your animals to keep those records and data management. And so some paint brand and maybe continual paint branding, things like that. A lot of times, like large producers lot their animals, like by groups or bands or something like that, so they can manage data by the larger groups. But there's got to be some way to identify animals. And so for us, it's these two tags that we utilize to help make sure we don't have problems. And we have had problems in the past. As a university, we have to turn in a quarterly inventory. And it used to be that if an animal lost a tag, you have 5 ewes that have lost a tag. They're all blackface ewes. They're all approximately the same age. It's sometimes very difficult to sort out who is who. The second step is to have an accurate record-keeping system. And it has to work for your operation. I don't care if it's computer-based or paper-based. My mom on our ranch, she kept a cow book, which is a journal book that we had all of our data in. Heaven help if we ever lose the cow book, but that was how she kept records. And she literally has a shelf of cow books from over the years that she used to manage her data. We utilize a couple different things for the sheep unit. Herd Boss is the web-based application that we use, and I'm going to actually show you a snippet of Herd Boss here. And Herd Boss is a great application because we actually can manage our entire herd in here. We have all the lambing data, all the information. If we click on a sheep, any DNA information we have is in here. The Scrapie tag is in here, the EID tag. We have their full pedigree as well. We have anytime they've been treated with foot bath or dewormed is in here. We have all of our medications. We have a weight history, mating history, if they've been ultrasounded, and we have like their loin depth and back fat. We've done the Flock 54 in terms of OPP, ovine progressive pneumonia susceptibility, callipage, fertility. So everything that we do is kept in Herd Boss, and we can access this data. We can generate reports. For example, RAM income report. And let me, like if we look at Heavy has been our ram that's been around a while. Sorry, I didn't want to click right there. These are all our young rams that we have that are just on the ground. But since we've had him, he has generated this much income for us on 22 lambs. We're averaging $260 a lamb because some of them do go to the meat slab and have been sold as feeder lambs and things like that. But that is what Heavy has been able to do for us. Once we sell some lambs out of Richard, we'll be able to tell that. And it's really handy to be able to get a glimpse of what is going on. And the better we get at using this, the more information we have. We can do a ewe income report. And if I want to know which ewes have been the most profitable for us, this is encouraging in that 7060, 7065, 7074 are all young ewes that we have bred and raised. And actually these two, I think, is Spike and Gizmo, are South Down crossbreds that have sold great average of lambs. They've sold $1,500. 933 is an older ewe that we've had, but she is highly productive. She always lambs, does well. And so and we've only been tracking data since 2018 in this program, but you can start seeing where we can start tracking profitability of our ewes. And as we get more information over time, we can really get a handle on this. Now, this column here actually tells us how many replacements we've kept. For example, this 602D, we've only sold 1 lamb of hers, but we have 4 of her ewe lambs in our flock, meaning she must do something right for us. Ninja, this is Ninja. She's sold some lambs. We've kept a couple replacement ewes from her, and so you can kind of see. I'm betting that 602 is the one we've kept the most replacements out of. 4448, we've kept almost everything we get out of her. We haven't sold any lambs because they're all been replacement ewes. So you have to utilize this information. And so this is what we use. We really like it. And it works for our system because it also has a mobile application that all of our student employees have. And so that we can easily, if we treat an animal, we can shoot side, document it, and put it in. We can also upload from our EID wand and collect from our scale head and import data into this as well. If we wanted to look at our sold report, we haven't got the check from Superior yet, but you can see where we've sold lambs and who they've gone to and average prices and things like that. So lots of information in here to help us manage our flock. And the one that I like the most actually is probably this label report, because if we keep accurate on our label report, we can find our fall drop band. This is how many ewes we have left to lamb this fall. Our lactation group. Here's how many moms, 33 moms, that have babies on the ground right now and are in lactation. And if we look at how many nursing lambs we have, there's 44 nursing lambs right now. So there's a quick way we can tell this information and get a handle on our flock and understand our numbers. So Herd Boss is very handy. The other thing we use is Excel for a pasture management spreadsheet and financial records. And actually, I'll probably go ahead and show you those. This may not be the last video, just because it's kind of fun to see this stuff. Some of the crew in here has seen it enough. Alright, so this is a copy of our annual grazing plan, and I'm just realizing I'm going to have to set 2021 up. But this is the 2020 grazing plan, and actually Manny has really kept this up. We monitor how many days the flock is in grazing by putting a 1 in the cell. That means that there have been animals grazing during that time. And this is where we can tell when were pastures last grazed, when were they irrigated, those types of things. And so you can see that we deferred some pastures for grazing, and those are the ones that we've been using heavier now. And we're set where we're going to probably rest these pastures here and hit these other ones a little bit harder. But they needed some rest as well. But this is how we can make decisions and understand how many grazing days. So this actually totals the number of grazing days. So if you'll note that pasture 2E, we've grazed it 120-ish days of, actually let me put the average up here. Yeah, 123 days out of 365. So a third of the year has been spent on this pasture. We've got to tone that down. And so we need to, there's some pastures like 1W that we have underutilized because we had a fence out. So we need to utilize that pasture a little bit better. And so this is how 2W, we haven't utilized the back end of it as much. There's not as much feed. So this is how we can get some information. We also try to track supplemental feed, which is a little bit of a challenge. We have to kind of guesstimate that, but just how much are we supplementing as well. Precipitation, and then we flag days that are either hot or cold. So if it's below 32, we flag it blue, and if it's above 90, we flag it red. So you can see pretty much all of July and August and into the fall. But now we're going to start getting into November. We're going to start having some of these cooler dates. And then we also managed to track precipitation. And you can see right now, we have not had a lot of precipitation, and that is a problem. The blue right here is when we irrigate. So we try to keep consistent with our irrigation. And so this kind of gives us everything in a snapshot of what we do. But we're going to kind of keep building on this and keep managing this. And now we have historical data for our pasture. And this is something we haven't done as well. And this last year and now I'll give Manny full credit on this. He's taken this project on, and it has been a tremendous amount of information. And now next year we can be like, okay, we focused heavily on these pastures. We've got to do a better job rotating through these pastures, and how can we manage it better? But until you have the data visualized in front of you, you can't make those types of decisions. But this is just an example of a Google sheet that we use. I have Excel on there, but any kind of a spreadsheet that's useful information to help us manage. Now, this isn't necessarily selection, but it is management of our program. Sorry, it's more fun to talk about that stuff too. I get excited when I start looking at numbers. All right. So now we've got to understand that we need to keep track of what traits are important to us. And so for us, it's growth and feeding ability. We sell project lambs to kids. They have got to hit the ground running. I don't want any kid to call me up and say, this lamb's not eating, it's not growing, it's not doing well. And so we focus heavily on their ability to eat and convert feed and gain for our buyers. We also focus on carcass quality. We want to make sure there's plenty of muscle and those types of things for these animals. We also, reproductive ability is probably third on our list, but we definitely pay attention to it, and we've been working on some improvement for the out-of-season breeding. We've actually bought in some sheep that are known for out-of-season breeding to help our entire flock. So, and also on here is probably phenotype. Just that we do need to select for phenotype because we sell the project lambs that are going to be shown at some point. We also participate in the National Sheep Improvement Program, and we're only about a year or so into this. But this is where we're going to be heading, is so that we can get breeding values for our sheep, which is like an EPD, where we can predict their genetic performance. We can predict which ewes may add higher weaning weights to their lambs from milking or those types of things. Or which ewes are going to have lambs with more loin depth, less fat, that are going to increase number born alive, and start selecting for those families of females that might really do well in our flock. And also, if we sell seed stock, like our Southdowns, if we sell Southdown rams that we can say, here's some information, it's just more information for our buyers to utilize and understand what they're getting and have more confidence in what they're buying. And so there's also a Carcass Plus index that I want to start calculating to provide one number that we could rank animals on to value their carcass trait and how they're going to genetically impact the flock for carcass quality. Now, when we start selecting, there's some terms we need to understand. We need to look at our genetic improvement per generation. And this is where we just simply take the heritability of a trait times the generation interval. And we don't calculate any of this specifically, but I sure do look at are genetic improvement over time. It's more common to express your genetic improvement over a year. What do these sheep do compared to last year or the year before? But when if you get into genetics and selection and breeding plans, the generation interval is the average age at which parents when their offspring are born. So in sheep, it's about 3 to 5 years. So if we have a generation interval of 4 years, that's how long it takes for genetic improvement to happen. And so it's the slow process, and it's a major investment that you really want to make sure that you understand and have a plan. Because if it takes 4 years to see a response and an impact on your flock, wow, if you go into this without a plan, where are you going to wind up? Who knows? And so that's why it's very important to have a selection plan and understand what your generation interval is, the heritability of traits, and how you can evaluate that. And so I mentioned in an earlier video that we can do single trait selection. The dairy industry was an example of that. And there's 3 major ways of single trait selection. We can look at the individual animal. Say, I like that one, I don't like that one, but not really consider the dam or the sire or any siblings or anything like that. We can do pedigree. And this is more what we do, not just single trait, but we look at the pedigrees based on the breeding values of the relatives and how they perform. You can progeny test, which is a form of pedigree selection, where you measure the performance of the offspring. But think about this. You have to go through the process of getting the offspring, raising them and testing them, and that is very expensive and time-consuming. Some form of combined, this is what we do, is pretty much an individual and a pedigree-based selection process. But we don't do single trait selection. We do look at multiple traits. And so we have more of a combination of the tandem and independent culling levels. And so from a multiple trait selection standpoint, a tandem selection is where you focus on one trait at a time till you get a certain goal and then bring in another trait. Phenotypically, that's how we have advanced our flock. Is we focused on rack shape and getting rack shape. Then we focused on hip design. And now we got to focus on the front end. We're building the pieces to get there. We also utilize independent culling levels. There's a minimum standard, and we define that each year. And anything below that, we don't keep. They're marketed in some way. You can also create selection indexes that ranks the individuals for economic merit based on 2 or more traits. And I have done this for things like pre-weaning growth and post-weaning growth, where I've assigned an index and ranked the animals so that I know which ones kind of performed in both of those traits, so we can optimize both pre- and post-weaning growth. We also have different types of mating systems. And we run a little bit more of a purebred system at the sheep unit, where we are mating males and females of a common genetic group. And this is talking about individuals within a breed. We're going to utilize things like inbreeding and outbreeding. For us, our 2 common genetic groups are our weather dams, the black-faced sheep. They're the ones designed to produce wethers, and the South Downs. Now, when we talk about outbreeding and inbreeding, that's actually referring to the relationship between the males and females. Inbreeding is mating animals more closely related than the average of the flock. Outbreeding is animals that are more distantly related than the average of the flock. And there are times when both are good and times when both are bad. And so we've been doing a subset of inbreeding called line breeding, where we've been focusing on certain genetic lines to help build consistency within our flock. The second big mating system is crossbreeding. we do have a handful of when we do mate males and females of different breeds. And we have several of the black-faced sheep and Southdown crosses. And so we have utilized that. It's usually because we need live lambs on the ground and something didn't breed up. But we're finding that those animals are very useful. We can also do what's called grading up. And I know producers that have done this, that they've taken some crossbred animals. For example, say you have a Texel Suffolk cross. And then you only breed to Suffolks. And you keep breeding to Suffolks. And eventually that Texel blood gets so diluted that you essentially have graded up to almost a pure breed, and brought them back to that pure status. Are they truly pure? No, but you sure can get close. We've seen examples of composite breeds. The Polypay was an example of a composite breed where they utilized various breeds to focus on certain traits. And then you have to breed them back to each other to create that consistency within the genetics. And then there's the systematic crossbreeding where you're using heterosis and breed complementarity. And heterosis is where the performance of the offspring outperforms the average of the parents. And you can use either 2-breed or 3-breed rotations most commonly. And that's where those females that we've kept that are half Suffolk or half blackface, half Southdown, they're actually starting to be some of our most profitable females. And something to look at down the road is continually crossing them and maintaining what they call an F1 generation that's 50-50. That might be something we consider as we keep moving forward with the flocks that we have. Now, there are some cool technologies that are coming out. The first is QTL and mapping. That's the quantitative trait loci. So remember, we learned what quantitative traits are. They're the ones that can be measured. Growth rates, weaning weights, wool production, parasite resistance, things like that. And so this is, now scientists are able to talk about where on the chromosome, what genes or groups of genes influence that trait, and we can map. So we can map the genes of a sheep and say, this one is more likely to develop ovine progressive pneumonia. That's what we've done with the flock 54. Or this sheep is less likely to do that. And we can start really narrowing down on our selection. I think this is where the future of livestock selection is going, and something that we need to understand. Genotyping. Identifying unique DNA sequences. And this relates to the QLT process. It's all a part of it. And this is like our flock 54, where we are collecting data and getting the results of the data and harvesting the animals, getting that information so that we can make our production decisions and apply that to our flock and make those mating decisions. And it's all part of trying to understand how everything ties together. Again, another piece of information to utilize and learn from. Finally, the last one that I want to talk about, I actually saw this pop up in Facebook today with a friend of mine, but the CRISPR technology, which is an actual enzyme that allows you to go in and edit an animal's DNA. So literally change the genetic sequence. Kind of crazy, huh? But UC Davis actually developed Cosmo. And this is a bull calf designed to produce 75% more male offspring. More steers to sell, more beef, so more income. And so they use this technology to insert a gene that's going to help determine gender. So if that bull, as he develops and grows and gets into the breeding program, his alleles are going to be more likely to be male determining alleles than female. And I just thought that was kind of a cool story to close upon, something happening here in California. But this technology is something that's going to become increasingly important, I think, as well for purebred producers to provide specific DNA for their customers. Crazy as that is, that's where we're heading. That wraps this section up. Don't forget to do the activity that is also available online.